everyone. How are you guys doing? Okay.
Very well, Ned. How are you?
I'm all right, yeah. So, glad we got that out of the way. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Jamspace episode 1. I am your host. You can call me Mr. Ned Rush. That's not my real name, but you can call me that anyway. I'm very pleased to be working with Music Hackspace to present some fine performances by artists who are really pushing it in the fields of visual and music technology. What is Jamspace? Well, you can kind of think of it as sort of music TV, I guess. Over the coming months, we'll be working on bringing in artists from all over the world to do a live performance. And then after each performance, we'll have talks with the artists about what they do, what they did in the performance, what they're into, what stuff they use, and just generally hang out, you know. So yeah, this is brought to you by Music Hackspace, which is what stuff they use, just generally hang out, you know. This is brought to you by Music Hackspace, which is a community hub that brings people together through online events to exchange ideas and learn anything to do in creative tech. So I hope you're all sitting comfortably. Maybe you have nice loungewear on. I just need to have a quick drink before we start. Okay, so who have we got today? Well, we've got Phelan, Kane and Baleem Shep, Ross Flight, aka Boss Kite, and Halina Rice. And we shall start with Phelan and Baleem. Take it away.
Hello, Ned. I think you're muted, sir. You're muted, Ned. Still can't hear you, mate. On Zoom.
How about now? There's going to be a few of these, I suspect, as we make it through the show, but we'll do our best. How are you? How are you doing?
Good, sir. Very good. That was fun, wasn't it?
It was fun, yes. That was a great performance. I could hear the motoric oozing out of that. I think you can definitely tell that you've just moved to Germany, I think. Yeah, so, I mean, that was a collaboration, I believe, between you and Baleem, who's not available today. So I think you're going to speak on his behalf. But yeah, so I was having a little nose around at some of the tech. It's nice to see you in your, a wider view of your studio. And to see that you actually do have as much stuff as you say that you do whenever we chat. I think you've got a few too many eventides, though. I think maybe no one needs 4. No one needs 2. You could take one out and send one to me, maybe, and then I think you'd be all right. But anyway, so maybe you could tell us a little bit about what was going on in that performance. What was it all about?
Well, they were 3 tracks that I had produced properly, and then we came up with the idea of doing Jamspace. So I basically broke down everything from the DAW session and, you know, made backing track parts out of each song, which is what the Octatrack was doing. But then I sampled all the individual drum hits and reprogrammed all the drums up with the analog rhythm and the machine drum, and the whole thing was sequenced from the Circlon, the little hardware sequencer.
I saw the
So no computer, yeah. And then basically, I mean, a lot of the original parts on the studio versions are quite different, but I took the main musical components, the MIDI, threw it on the Circlon, and then just found some other stuff that would fit on a table that would be able to play those parts. So yeah, a bit of fun really, and a bit of sort of reworking. It sounds quite different from the original, but I did the video recording, sent it to Baleem, and he built a few touch patches. So he sent me over the crazy sort of, I guess the second song is like the Ready Break Man. If you're from the UK, you might know what I'm talking about with the glowing head. And then the third one was like using different types of noise. And then I basically sort of, because I knew the music a bit better and Baleem was a bit busy, I sort of took his work and ran with it and did a few more bits of automation in touch. I sort of followed his sort of lead a little bit. The first track was mostly my visuals really, because we sort of didn't have a lot of time to do the whole thing. But Baleem created the majority of the patches and got the aesthetic going, and I sort of filled it in and rendered it. And my computer nearly died when I tried to bounce that. But yeah, a bit of fun, you know, and it was all sort of totally audio reactive, lots of really clever stuff going on in Touch Designer. So yeah, he's a bit of a ninja, I believe, isn't he?
So I hear, yeah. It's a shame he can't make it. I was looking forward to talking to a touch designer nerd about, because I literally know nothing about it apart from bananas. Everyone just posts pictures of bananas about touch designer on the internet. So I just, but yeah. So yeah, great stuff. Yeah, there was some I think maybe there was some sort of like video feedback processing. I could probably sense.
There's loads of
these things kind of going.
Yeah, there's lots of operators doing all sorts of stuff. I mean, there's a lot of stuff from the kick drum. There was counters. There's lots of audio activity. There was lots of GLSLL going on as well. I mean, the first one was like a tan C function I wrote that was doing audio reactive to the bass drum. Lots of opacity and fade in and fade outs. So there's sort of 3 little networks that were all driven off different bits of the audio. So most of it was written reactive to the drums, you know. But yeah, it's pretty cool, you know. It's kind of a good little project to do. And we're really excited to see what other people might want to send us in, because we want to do more of this stuff. And hopefully people might be inspired to, you know, do anything they feel like will be creative use of technology. And maybe we'll have another Jamspace in a month or 2, you know.
Absolutely, yeah. Maybe this will get some people kind of like, oh, I want to do that. I want to do that. Let me have a go. Great. So yeah, how did it come together that you and Baleem sort of worked on this? How did that sort of happen?
Well, it was just a sort of an idea to get started with this, and I thought maybe the Hackspace community is kind of funky. We do lots of really interesting stuff. We've got a great Discord, but we don't really get an opportunity to really see some of our students or the community's work. So this was the idea behind it, really. And I thought if we're going to do the first one, then we should probably have a collaboration between some of the people that actually teach with us. So because I'm really getting excited about Touch Designer, I thought it'd be really awesome. I could sort of hack a little bit of William's knowledge and learn a little bit of him by collaborating, you know. So awesome.
Well, that's often a good thing to do, isn't it? Is to learn new tricks, is to actually work on something with someone else that has a clear objective and clear goal, and then you pick up workflows off each other, and or bad habits or good habits or whatever, but that it all kind of goes into the pot of like your own skills and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, bad habits can be good, can't they? Sometimes bad habits and happy accidents are what it's all about, mate. Really, yeah.
Well, quite, yeah. I mean, so, yeah. Sometimes, a bad habit can just work when you're in the flow, and you just need to stick with it. And instead of thinking, oh, I must change that, I must work on that. Sometimes it's just like, oh, I'll just do that thing. I'll use that awful mic I use every time or something. Yeah. So, could you go into a little bit more depth about perhaps how the audio and the visuals were connected?
Well, it's just audio activities. There's a little FFT in Touch that's kicking out values of the audio. So we're basically doing audio reactive visuals where it's listening to the bass drum. There's a couple of filters in Touch. You can use audio filters. So I took my drum mix, the stereo mix, and just like filtered down to the kick on a channel and used that to produce channel data, to be able to sort of feed it off into something else. So the great thing about Touch is you can basically automate and manipulate anything from anything. So lots of chops going on. That's the channel data operators in Touch, which we're doing lots of stuff on the surface and texture stuff in there,
Chops.
Yeah, chops are channel data, like LFOs and stuff like that. Yeah, there's lots of software LFOs going on and lots of audio data that's been converted into just, modulation sources, basically, much like you'd in Ableton or even Jitter and Max,
Fantastic. Yeah, I Touch Designer is kind of one of those things where I think I should probably get into it, but then I kind of have to remind myself that I have enough rabbit holes as it is, and I have a rabbit hole in Max MSP, which is still ongoing. But everything I've seen in Touch is I've always thought, oh yeah, that does look good. And so that I kind of liked the to start with. I was sort of kind of concentrating really on the music, and then suddenly I noticed you were talking about the Ready Breck hands earlier on. I started to notice that, like, oh, his hands, what's going on with his hands? Only like your kind of body, your head and hands. So which kind of actually drew my attention visually to the fact that you were kind of interacting with the music. So there was quite a nice sort of blend there of using the visual to highlight what you were kind of doing physically, So
yeah, that was
a good move.
Quite nice motion tracking, basically. It's what Billy set up, his motion tracking patch, which we could then overlay with, different generative visuals, which is pretty clever stuff. So,
Okay, fantastic. So, well, it's been great chatting with you about this, and that was a great performance. Thank you for taking part. Where can people online find out more about what you're doing or any future collaborations with William or what William's up to?
Check out our website. So metafunction.co.uk is me, and William is electronaut.com. But William's also got a really awesome series of free Touch Designer tutorials on his YouTube channel. So if you just look for his name on YouTube, I think we put the links in the chat. They're up on our website as well, but there's, obviously loads of places where you can find us through musichackspace.org or our own personal sites, our own personal channels. So come and say hello,
Great. Okay, well, thank you very much. Let's crack on then, shall we? Let's move on to Ross. We'll see you later on, feeling all right?
Thanks, mate. See you later.
So now we're going to move on to Ross Flight, aka Boss Kite. Take it away.
And stuff, I'm getting bruised up and stuff. I'm getting bruised up and stuff.
Biggest insecurity. Biggest insecurity. Biggest insecurity. Biggest insecurity. Biggest insecurity. Biggest insecurity.
Well, Ross, there you
Hi.
are. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear, Ned. How are you?
Good. I'm all right. It's very nice to see you.
Thank you.
It's been a while since our paths crossed. I think maybe apart from briefly last year.
Yeah.
Before that, maybe some 15 years.
Probably more than that. Yeah.
Back at one of Emily's nights, I think.
Rude NHS days.
Yes, those days. Yeah. So I mean, that was just, I still can't quite wrap my head around it. I mean, that's not the first time I've seen you do that, but I'm still equally as blown away on the second viewing. In the first, my first item in my notes of what I was going to ask you was what on earth was going on there? That was my first. I think I could probably hazard a guess, but obviously I'm going to let you sort of talk us through it.
Well, it's basically an infrared camera which is tracking my skeleton and all the joints on my body and is spitting out OSC data. So that's kind of the hard work on the back end, which, I mean, I didn't program. I'm not a line level coder. It's actually an object from a guy called Dale Furrows. I get asked quite a lot, like where the back end's coming from. And there's a really, really nice object. I mean, it's a paid for object, but it's only about 20 or 30 euros. And basically it detects the camera and it spits out OSC information on a float from, I think, -1 to 1 or 0 to 1 for every joint that you have in your body on the X, the Y, and the Z axis. So it spits out like huge amounts of information. And I kind of got into it just over 5 years ago. I mean, I've always been into like controllerism, if you kind of understand that term. Like I've always wanted to play live, and I've been super inspired like by people in the past, like, you know, like Tim Exile and like Beardy Man, people that can just get on stage and just like jam it and rock it and like really perform without, like, you know, I used to get so frustrated like in the noughties, like going to gigs and just seeing people that could be playing solitaire behind their computer.
That was me.
Like,
I was that person.
So like anyone that was like giving it someone on a bunch of controllers, I was always just like, yeah, those are the guys. Like I can see what they're doing. Like I can see their arms moving and just the physicality on stage. So I've always really like enjoyed those performances. And this was kind of just a natural progression from there. I mean, I do owe quite a lot of the inspiration from this Australian guy. Shout out to a guy down there who doesn't really do the Connect stuff anymore. I think he's more of a visual artist called Chris Vick. You should check out some of his work.
I know Chris Vick, yeah.
So Chris Vick released a Max patch called Connector probably about 7 or 8 years ago, which has kind of gone defunct now. But a lot of the UI on my own patch has basically been nicked from his. I don't know what his back end's like, but yeah, I kind of opened up that Connector patch and I was like, right, okay, I think I can kind of build my own thing. So yeah, basically Max is taking in all of this OSC data. I've created like a GUI where I'm basically combining and scaling data into like, essentially each performance uses kind of like 24 kind of like combo OSC controls that then gets spat out as MIDI information. So what I can do with that is I can take like the information of the left axis on the right hand and the left axis on the left hand, but then combine those two pieces of data, and then it creates a new piece of data, which I would call like width. So if I held my hands together and moved my hands like this, I would get nothing on that control, right? But then by putting those two together, I can create a new sense called width. So then I can apply like kind of operators to each of those pieces of data that the OSC is combining, so that it can be like a linear curve or like an exponential curve or whatever the other curve is that goes like that. It's like a bell. I'm not a mathematician, but you know,
logarithmic.
I think it's logarithmic, but yeah. So each patch basically has kind of 24 combinations of the OSC data that comes in from there, and then I think I've got about another 6 fixed pieces of control which detect the speed of like movements on certain axes. So you can see that there are certain moments at the part of the video where I can kind of like flick my hand and I can get like another value which actually detects velocity like over time. So I've got 6 pieces of data like that, and that basically gets plumbed into Ableton, and there's probably about 120 mappings inside of Ableton on loads of things, and they're all on basically kind of macro instruments. So I'll kind of make like a macro instrument or a macro effect, which will have like kind of multi mappings, and then I'll kind of map onto them, and then it kind of just goes from there, really.
It really is quite something. I mean, it's sort of, it's so many things. It's kind of beautiful and frightening sometimes, but at the same time. And it, like they're all like, I was just kind of thinking, like I was watching it and I was thinking, it's like you're swimming in sound, man. It's like you're swimming in the ocean of sound.
Oh, it's
And
fun to play, man. It's a lot of fun. It's
it
a lot
looks,
of fun.
yeah. I mean, I could see just getting hours just like lost in that. But you know, it's kind of like it. You know, it really is like you're kind of conducting as well. You're literally conducting the tech, but also there's kind of like a contemporary dance thing about it. I mean, I'm no contemporary dance expert, but like
No, neither am I. I mean, I just always have enjoyed dancing. Like,
I'm
love
pretty
dancing.
sure you could pass it off.
Well, I did a very short three-month course at the Space, an introduction to contemporary dance, when I had nothing to do a couple of years ago. But I am certainly no professional in no way, shape, or form. I just enjoy it, and I've always just, you know, if I'm in a club or somewhere, you just kind of have that imagination that like you're in that sort of situation. The music in a club is controlling you, and I've always loved that feeling of dancing. So I've always wanted to, I guess the kind of the crux of the project was to try and turn that on its head, and for me to not be able to not have to make any music, like just put like a few files into Ableton and basically just generate it from however I feel. It's like super improvised, and yeah, you can be really quite free with it.
And so what kind of elements of the sound playback do you have control over? I'm guessing like maybe start position of a sound or something, or perhaps like, I was sort of trying to work out, I was thinking, okay, well, maybe you can kind of scrub through a sound and then maybe you jump to like a different point on the Z axis and it's a different sound or something. I was just curious, like,
yeah, well,
what you're actually controlling.
It's evolved quite a lot. And I think it wasn't until probably the start of the last lockdown when probably a mutual friend of ours, Nick, who runs Michael Crux in London, asked me to dust off the set. This set is one of those things I've always kind of put some time into, and then it's gone on the shelf, and I've kind of been slowly developing over 5 years. But I kind of got stuck in a bit of a rut where I was kind of making these like instruments that like the whole max patch would be controlling like one sound, which would be like, I don't know, like a dub stab chord, which I could open up some reverb and, you know, pan and push. And then there'd be another one, which is like a drum masher, but I've never known how to like, it was always really hard to work out how to like go from one to the other and create like a continuous set. So it wasn't really until the beginning of this year that I tried to kind of make like a whole sound set that could work for like 15 minutes. But generally inside of Ableton, there's like a stem that is basically providing like the pads, which is usually at the moment, I'm kind of controlling with that kind of width motion. And then I've got some other filters on there with the elbows and stuff.
Give it more elbow.
I've got the that FM bass was basically when I lean back, and then also the width will then take over that, but only when I lean back, and that's controlling a few FM parameters on that bass. Similarly, when I lean forward, it kind of takes over from the width parameter, and the width parameter is then controlling like these FM chords with this LFO. But I think what you're talking about is a lot of that, the granular stuff.
Yeah, I'm sensing some sort of like you're going to a certain position in the sound.
Yeah, I got really inspired from that when I was actually at university. So that must have been around 2004 or something. I saw this woman play from the Sonic Arts Network, and she did an amazing performance at our university where she was scrubbing through like dialogue, and I think she was using like a pressure sensor on this suit that she was wearing, and it was the most magical moment. And I just saw her move her arm and this like word emerge, and I was just like, I've just got to learn how to do that because it's so cool. So what's really happening is that there's essentially just like a stem with like loads of different like words and like phrases. They might only be like 3 or 4 seconds long, with like some kind of noise that gets kind of cut into them. And every time like my hand crosses over a certain threshold on the downward, so on the Z axis of each hand, it will basically grab, I think, a 1 or 2 second buffer from that stem. Then when I lift my hand back up, I can then scrub through that 2 second buffer. So I can either hold it in a position and like
so you're like picking it up. You're kind of like picking up a sound off the floor.
Yeah, kind of. And then every time my other hand drops below that threshold, either hand, it's then taking 2 seconds of buffer off of this continuous like stem, and then like holding it in my hand, and then I can basically scrub through it. I've tried loads of different ways to do it, like loading a new sample every time it passed through it. And that's kind of it's basically like a Max for Live granular synth that I hacked off of some Max Forum basically. So that's the only Max for Live device I think that's in there that's bespoke, apart from obviously the Max Pack stuff built. But yeah, it ends up being quite fun. So it's quite random what words I will pick up. Like sometimes it will be half of one phrase and half of another, and it doesn't really make a full sentence or a word, in which case I'll often throw it away. And it kind of then ends up influencing the performance, because if suddenly I get a really nice word, or I know that I can almost like scrub through something, I know to kind of to hold that word a little bit longer in the air and maybe play with it a bit more. And if I don't pick up a couple of nice words, then I'll just go back to playing with the pads or the bass. So it's kind of, you know, like what Felon was saying about those happy accidents. It's kind of this chance occurrence of the granular stuff kind of will lead me on to like how I'm actually like performing with it a little bit.
Yeah, fantastic. I like the sound of that. I've always sort of been quite interested in the idea of kind of like a sort of just trying to think of the term that I came up with. It was like a kind of musical sort of fruit machine. Like a musical one-arm bandit where you kind of pull the arm and it goes and gives you some things and you have to do something with that, and you can either run with it or have another go and get something else, and maybe it's better or worse or something, and you keep going in like a performance with samples and stuff. I like what you said about kind of throwing it away, like, oh, I don't know, this sounds bad, I'll just sort of
exactly.
literally physically throw it away. So yeah, I mean, like it's great to hear that you're sort of using Max, because like there was, I suspect that maybe if we keep doing this, we'll be talking to a lot of people who are perhaps making their own instruments. And like at one sort of kind of line of conversation I was thinking might sort of come up quite regularly is sort of as the developer and the artist, performing artist or composer or whatever, is like, how do you deal with finding that balance between you know, spending the time in doing the research and experimenting and actually developing the instrument, and then kind of knowing when to sort of stop and go, right, I actually need to start playing it and start performing with it and experiment and learning how to use it, you know, because I've done a little bit of Mac stuff myself, and sometimes I kind of have to go, I need to stop putting more things in this. You know, I've got to come back, and I've actually got to sort of kind of like a piece of music, you know, you sort of have to kind of finish it and just go, right, now let's actually see what it can do, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I've been developing this patch for probably on and off for like 5 years. So every time I've kind of tried something, it's always been like, oh, okay, well, now let me do that. And then I'm like, okay, well, that works. And then I just start moving in front of it. And then I'll be like, oh, maybe I want to like twist my body, or maybe I want to just like dip my shoulders. And then I'll be like, right, okay, am I going to get a value off the shoulders? Or actually, there's this cool value where if I lower my body, I can actually get like a spatial relation value of just like kind of dipping my whole body. So, okay, let's add that into the patch. But I think the patch is like probably almost there now, because like you say, I've been tweaking with it for so long. And then it kind of got into a stage where like, well, okay, how can I actually make something that like sounds decent with it? Because for a long time, it was quite demonstrative. You know what I mean? It was like, right, okay, I can, you know, that obviously there's been loads of people doing this sort of like, you working with this sort of tech from like the 70s. And, you know, to make like a basic theremin and to control like the pitch and the volume is like, it's super easy to do, like really, once you get a couple of pieces of data. But it's all about the mapping. It's like the most important thing. Whenever I get quite a lot of people from like studying at university, like sound colleges, like asking me about the back end and how it's working. And I'm always just like, just mapping. It's just mapping. Like, what do you think? And it's like, again, kind of because I do a lot of theatre work, and I work with quite a lot of like physical performers. So I'm always kind of thinking a little bit about like the image that I'm creating as well. So like, you know, what does it mean to be like, to have my arms open, or like to have my arms up here and close to my head?
Yeah, like body language.
For me, that represents quite like a thin, like disgusted, like dirty sound. So I try and map those to parameters which will thin out the sound and like grit it up. Or, you know, obviously when I have much more open body, then I'm mapping it to things like, you know, reverbs and filters, because it in my head it just automatically like matches like ways that I'm kind of like moving myself. So, you know, it's quite easy to make something that is just a one-for-one comparison to like a parameter. But it's just kind of having that idea for like, well, what do I want it to sound like when my body is in like a certain shape? So that kind of gives me a lot of inspiration for then making the patch. But mainly, I never get to the point of actually making music with it, because I just generally hate making music. Like, if I'm trying to do it for too long, I get too frustrated with it, which is why I basically, like, I think a lot of us learn Max, because all of a sudden you're like, oh, I can just learn a system, and then I don't have to worry about the aesthetic value and what genre I'm in and all of this nonsense. So yeah, I mean, I've always loved performing, so I'm just going to really try and push for this to like go out into nights, and I really want to hear it on a big sound system, to be perfectly honest, because I'm still not done that yet, and I would just love to be in front of a rig and kind of hear this in a big room.
Yeah, and it's kind of one of those things that sort of could work in lots of different types of environments, like a music venue, a theater, or or even like on the street, or like it kind of when you were talking about your work in the theater and working with multiple people, I was wondering, like, have you ever thought about having it? I guess you'd need multiple cameras, but like having multiple people and they're kind of like doing.
Yeah, I did a residency out in 2017 in New York with just quite a young girl who was doing her BA out there, and she needed some extracurricular, and she flew me out there, and we had like 4 days with a couple of dancers, and it was really fun. It was really cool. But it's kind of weird because I know the system so much. I'm always like catering for it for myself. So it's kind of quite hard when I get different people in front of it, because sometimes I'm just like, well, just go and like move. And then I'm just like, oh God, this sounds awful, because they're not like hitting the right spots, and they're not.
They're moving in this way. They don't know the sweet spots.
They're moving in this way that the system is just not getting. But sometimes, like, there was this one girl that came in for like a day, and she just started moving, and I was just like, oh my God, like, she's made sounds out of this system that I've never even heard before. Brilliant. Because she's just like bending her elbows and her shoulders in a certain way, and she started getting all these weird resonances out of this filter. And I was just like, oh my God, this is mad. But I've had a couple of like quite tricky occasions with dancers, but it just hasn't really gelled. But in terms of multiple, I've managed to just about get 2 people tracking, because it's a Connect 2.0 on the Windows side of my machine. So I've just about managed to get 2 people tracking with it, but it just made my computer basically fall over. So with a decent like hardware PC, I think you could track 2 people per camera. Otherwise, I would look to probably get, some money and a commission and try and get multiple setups for multiple people, but I would love it. I've always loved the idea of kind of a Kraftwerk version of this, with 4 people kind of controlling 4 instruments, like at 4 podiums. That would be quite cool.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, it's brilliant stuff. And so, yeah, any plans for the future? I mean, when live music returns to normal, which apparently it's starting to, any plans to take that into the real world?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that I need to kind of get a little bit more variety in there. Like, at the moment, I'm only really using like one sort of sound set for like 10 or 15 minutes, but I think I can get to a point where it kind of evolves a lot more over kind of like half an hour, 40 minutes. So I need to kind of push that a little bit and make the sets a little bit more varied, I think. And then, yeah, I would love to get some slots, because like, yeah, I just need to find the right places that be up for it, basically. I just want to play it on a big rig.
Yeah, indeed. Well, yes, let's keep in touch then about that. Yeah, so, and where is the best place to point people towards you on the internet?
Yeah, rossflight.com is mainly where I keep a lot of my professional work. And under the projects tab, I usually have quite a lot of information about the Connect videos. And I've got a Bandcamp, which is bosskite.bandcamp.com. And I might try and do a tutorial video about the back end of that and how it's all working in cameras, because I do get quite a lot of people asking me, oh, what is that? And I end up just churning out the same email, like, once a month, trying to explain what the cameras are and what the system is. And I might even give the patch away for free now, because I've been fanning around with it for so long that it's probably worth to see the light of day for a lot of people.
Fantastic. Well, it's been great chatting with you. Thank you so much for your time and for that contribution. And yeah, we'll have a quick catch up towards the end. So yeah, thanks, Ross. And now I think we'll move on to Halina Rice. Take it away. Okay, Halina, hi.
Hi.
How's it going? There you are.
Yeah, thanks.
It's very great to be chatting with you like this. There's a lot to unpack about what you're up to. So yeah, I'll just get a few things out of the way. I was maybe perhaps a little late to the party in finding out about your work. I think it was the first time was when we were actually on the same bill for Plugged live in October. And I was like, so when it started, I was like, hang on, what's going on here? This is sort of, okay, this is sort of like a world. And then I was like, what's that thing in the middle? And what's that person doing? And then I was like, oh, hang on. Oh, that's you. You're in there. You're in the world. But like, it's coming from you there in the real world. And I was like, what's going on? And so, yeah, similarly to Ross, the first item in my notes is, can you just explain what on earth is going on in there?
Yeah, for sure. So effectively, as I'm just doing the audio out of my MacBook Pro with Ableton Push 2, my body's being mapped by a Connect 2, and the point cloud information from that is being passed to a PC on which the graphics are taking place, into a kind of pre-prepared file where the visuals have been created in Unity 3D. And it's a special file, so it's created so that that point cloud always stays in a relative part. So I should always be on the plinth in the middle of it. And as the camera sort of sweeps around, it's going to kind of turn around me in 3D. So yeah, and just to talk a little bit about the inspiration for that, it goes back to I went to a conference, Ableton Loop conference in 2017, where I saw a digital artist called Kojiro Takahashi perform with electronic artist No Such Thing. And the same reaction that you described, I was watching them on stage and they had visuals behind them, and somehow they were appearing kind of in this weird abstract space with cameras sweeping around them. And I just couldn't work out how they were doing that. And later down the road, sort of in 2019, I've been working with a motion designer called Jan Petirek. And we were looking to put together a kind of at that point, a live show with visuals, and he was really interested in Unity. And we did a kind of prototype of audio and visuals actually at Abbey Road at the end of 2019. And then when lockdown occurred, it was kind of how do we translate that into a virtual experience? And the memory of that show, which was really profound, kind of came back to me. So we went back and we studied all the tapes of what they were doing, and we were like, okay. And he actually had, Kojiro Takahashi had actually sort of mapped together 3 Connect 2s around them, so they could get probably a more accurate sort of back version as well as a front version. But even with just one, you've got just about enough information to give an impression of 3-dimensionality. So I just kind of bought a Connect 2 off eBay, and then randomly ended up employing an agency in Armenia. I'd give a shout out to Xtech, who work in AR and VR, who basically helped create the file for us where the figure was sort of fixed in the file, which then gave Jan and I the ability to and creative freedom to just work whatever Unity environment around that, so that we could just try and match it to the flavor of the track effectively.
Fantastic. I mean, it's mind-blowing. I think one thing that really struck me the sort of the first time round I saw this stuff in October was how kind of sort of poignant it was for the time, in 2020, where like a lot of people were still not really able to go anywhere, and a lot of musicians were still not able to perform in spaces, and yet you were somehow able to kind of prove that no, I will not be beaten by that. And okay, I might not be able to go into a physical space, but here I am in a virtual space where I can still do a performance, and like that's fantastic. And I suspect maybe that wasn't like your intention to kind of like, that wasn't your motivation, like to pursue this. It was like, well, it's lockdown, so I'm going to prove people that we can't be beaten. But like I'm just interested to hear like what your thoughts and feelings were when you sort of saw it in action for the first time. Were you excited, or were you like, was it a bit weird? Or
yeah, I mean, there was a kind of eureka, wow, it actually works, because it seems like a lot of trial and error, because it didn't seem to be just completely freely available, although some of the work of Kojiro Takahashi is very generous. He makes a lot of things available, but still with the company we were working at, it's kind of like you'll sort of place the figure, and then the figure will be sort of two meters below the plinth, or
yeah,
like, how do we get that right? And then Jan doesn't have a Connect where he is, so I'd have to sort of do all the trials and then do videos and send them back to him until we worked out that you could actually record Connect information, and then he can just play it into his Unity project. So there was a lot where some things were kind of easy to navigate because they're documented, and some things are really undocumented, and in a way I think we quite like that, because it felt like we were kind of discovering for ourselves. But yes, when we were able to, the first one was a video called Spheres, where we created kind of almost like a snow globe type environment, and then we sort of had this big panning shot at the beginning coming into me performing on a platform. It's like, whoa, this works, because I think compared to some of the solutions I've seen in VR or green screen, I mean, it is possible to do pan back shots, but a lot of times people are doing stuff that's quite close to, so it felt during lockdown that we were all being forced into quite claustrophobic spaces, and almost what I want to do in particular with the sort of music and the visuals is create something a little bit more cathedral like, something that's sort of
vast,
spacious, and like an abstract, really abstract universe, so you can kind of lose yourself in it and not and it's not to do with the world in front of you right now. So
yeah, fantastic. And so so I since then I've kind of heard you in other corners of the internet talk about things like mixed reality or hybrid reality, and I was like, oh, this all sounds pretty interesting. And so I was kind of like, what sort of sparked the idea to explore a concept of mixed reality other than perhaps being stuck at home?
I mean, to be honest, I think in a funny way, it was that. And because when we were first looking at the prototype of the show in 2019, we weren't thinking of putting me in it. We were just going to build, we just want to build beautiful, big, abstract visuals, and then maybe have me performing, because we were thinking about live, where I was actually there. We hadn't, the concept of live streaming, it hadn't even really crossed my mind at that stage. So it is a little bit by force of what's happened. So, but it's been a fantastic opportunity to pursue that, and it seems to have hit down well with people who've seen it now. Started sort of discussing being parts of various arts festivals on the back of that. So yeah, it seems to complement what I've been doing on the audio side quite nicely. It was never meant to be an act that was purely an AV act, but in a way it's working quite well together. So it's and there's lots more to explore. So the last thing, in fact, that we did for Breaks, which was the last release in April, we cracked how to get the audience to actually affect the visuals in real time.
I think I saw it. I was on Twitch, right? Yeah. Was that the Twitch thing? Yeah.
That's it. So we found this piece of script on the web where if you type in sort of a command like exclamation command, etc., we made it so that it would immediately take your username and make it into a piece of graffiti on the wall, absolutely in real time. And as soon as we made that connection, that was really exciting, because either whether it's in a virtual space or whether we do that in a live environment, it means we can find all sorts of creative ways to have the audience involved. And at the end of the day, what we want to do is create experiences for people where we're interested in creating sort of immersive and involving and emotionally interesting pieces for people. And ideally, as we say, like in a live space, maybe hybrid, with a live stream concurrently.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, I just think it kind of it's just going to kind of extend possibilities for gigs post-pandemic. Post-pandemic gigs is a thing that I've sort of been, or live performances is something that I've just sort of been mulling over for the best part of this year, of like, I don't think things will strictly go back to normal. They'll go back to this kind of like new normal where everything's kind of really extended now. So, it's not just like there's a person on the stage. There's a person on the stage who's also being put into a virtual world, which is being shown on the stage and on the internet, which is interacting with people and the crowd and people on the internet, just making the whole thing much bigger. And I think it's fantastic, and it just shows like what people can come up with if they're sort of maybe stuck at home for a year. That we'll all come back and we'll go like, all right, we're ready to perform now, but now everything's much better and bigger, and there's all of these new things that we can try in terms of extending a performance or a performance environment. It's fantastic. Yeah. And so what are your plans for the future then? And in terms of like fitting this into actual a physical space in the future, anything on that?
Yeah, so I'm currently in discussions with a venue and also a company that actually shoot artists and then they do on-demand ticketed performances online. But they often sort of will foot the production side of the filming. They have a professional production crew, and in the past actually they've generally done classical music, so they're beginning to make a break into the electronic side. So with some luck in the next couple of months, we'll initially almost do, like, again, the prototype to the show we always talked about in a live venue, but with these visuals as well. And then that almost forms a bit of a calling card to go out to various venues and festivals, etc., and try and perform this more widely, I guess.
Fantastic. Well, I wish you all the best with that. And I look forward to attending both a virtual one and a live one in the future. Yeah. And so where is the best place for people to catch you on the internet currently?
Yeah, sure. So my website is halinarice.com. But on all the DSPs, it's under my name, which is Halina Rice, and same for all of the socials. So I think I'm Halina Rice _music for Instagram, which is probably the key social for me.
Okay, fantastic. Well, it's been great chatting with you, and let's hope we can chat again in the future. And I guess that brings us nicely to the end of the first episode of Jamspace. So thank you everyone for taking part and contributing all this brilliant material. And thanks to everyone watching. I think we're all going to come together now and say goodbye. Yeah, so I'd say that was a pretty successful first episode. A few blips here and there, but it's going to happen, isn't it? So yeah, thank you, Phelan. Thank you, Ross. Thank you, Halina. And we'll see you again in the future.